What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Labyrinth of Grisaia. Hopefully I don't have to do any more takes of this intro because this is my fourth one. I apparently suck at introducing in videos. But anyways, last time we said goodbye to Asuko. Asuko had passed away due to her health, and now Yuuji is living with JB, and I'm pretty sure that's where we left off. I'm pretty damn sure we are nearing the end of the grand route. So there's not much left to go. I don't know how much there is left to go. I'm just pretty sure that maybe two more hours of content at the most, or at the least. But we don't have much to go. We are nearing the end. I almost said we are ending the near earlier. But let's jump right back into this. I believe we are somewhat in the middle of context, but I had to end it last time where I ended it, so I guess let's just jump right back in. Well, more or less. I was saying last time that JB is probably being the nicest I've ever seen her, but I think that's sort of because Yuuji is also being nice. Let's see. Oh, right. How about a firmer toothbrush? Yours is way too soft. Never mind what I just said. I like the kind with stiffer hairs. It's not that big a deal, though. I can just buy one at the convenience store. I actually didn't catch that. You said I could use anything in the apartment, didn't you? Was it off limits? Sorry, JB. I hadn't been aware of this previously, but apparently I was just as crude as Asuko in some respects. Ever since that day, there were 3 toothbrushes in the apartment. Mine, JB's, and the one she used before I moved in. I didn't really mind. JB was probably in the right, and a few minor hassles seemed to be par for the course with women. When I finished brushing my teeth and washing my face, I glanced into the mirror and realized my hair had grown out a little. Sooner or later, JB would probably tell me to cut it. And that was the sort of woman she was. After returning to my room, I dressed myself. For some reason, JB seemed to enjoy buying me clothes. When I lived in the cabin with Asuko, I'd never given much thought to what I wore. We were both the kind of people who felt perfectly at home running around in blue track pants and a combat jacket. They do say that a man's wardrobe tends to change depending on the woman he is with, but I think JB was actively trying to change me from the clothes up. The outfit she'd left me on this particular morning was, as usual, a bit much. First, there was a black Italian shirt, tight-fitting and narrow in the arms. The collar was designed to be worn widely open. She had also picked out a banker striped suit to go along with it. What's more, the color was a highly regal shade of purple. The suit was unusually short in the arms, so you were probably supposed to fold the cuffs of your inner shirt over the sleeves of the jacket. When I tried on the pants, I discovered they were also very slim. If I sweated while sitting down in these things, they'd probably glue themselves to my thighs. To top it all off, a bottle of French cologne tumbled noisily out of the bag. Apparently, she even wanted me to decide my body odor for me. The instructions, in French naturally, indicated I should spray it on my neck, behind my ears, on my wrists, and on either side of my abdomen. I hadn't struggled my way through training in 5 languages for this. Putting on the shirt, jacket, and silver necklace to complete the outfit JB had left me, I stood in front of the mirror and evaluated myself. I'm either an intellectual Yakuza, what the fuck, or a I don't even know host. If I walked around Yamanashi wearing something like this, they'd probably heckle me for dressing like a peacock. If I went to the harbor in it'd be where you headed in them purty clothes, brother. Then again, this was Akasaka, right next door to whatever that place is. I probably wouldn't stand out too much in a neighborhood like this. Sooner or later, I'd probably grow accustomed to my new life here. Right. Accustomed. In other words, I still had to adapt myself to the world around me, and honestly, it felt a bit stifling. That wasn't just true for me, I think it applied for JB as well. It was a fact that Asako was dead. We had to accept that and accustom ourselves to it. But that proved much more difficult than either of us had expected. Where did the music go? Oh, the music got softer. Even when we talked about work, Asako's name would inevitably pop up when the discussion turned to specific tactics or general strategy. During meals, just seeing a favorite of Asako's on the table would remind us of her. Eventually, we began to fall silent every time she came up in conversation. Kusakabe Asako had been an even larger part of us than we'd known. And I don't know why this scene is here. Words almost spoken, trapped by our closed mouths, curdled to frustration in our chests. The memory of Asako became a thorn in our hearts. By the time things got this far, the two of us no longer knew how to interact with each other. We tried to fill the holes in our hearts by holding each other, hurting each other. No, I was hurting JB. That's all. Out of selfish sadness. I'd lost one woman, and now I was taking my pain out on another. Even so, JB accepted my actions without saying a thing. Maybe she knew it was the only form of, I lost my place. She knew it was the only form of comfort she could offer me. Her kindness was almost unbearable. Sometimes, when I thought about how dependent I was on her compassion, the guilt and shame would bring me to the verge of tears. Whenever JB saw me holding back the urge to cry, tears filled her eyes as well, and she hugged me tightly. We had to find a better way forward than this. We needed to live more boldly, more crudely, the way Asako had.
私と一緒にいるとどうしても思い出してしまうなら一緒にいない方がいいのかな
Wasn't the point of living with JB supposed to move on? When JB got home late for work, she'd take a bath, have a few drinks, and say the same thing she always did. You don't have to worry about me. As she slumped back on the couch, I stood behind her, using a dryer on her hair and giving her my usual replies.
辛いのは私の方かもね。ごめん、ユージ。忘れて。
Tears rolling down her face, JB fell asleep right there on the couch. My heart aching, I picked her up without a word and carried her to her bed. One day, after things had continued like this for some time, JB left for work and didn't come back. Periodically, she'd check in over the phone. JB claimed she was busy with work, but in reality, she was probably just avoiding me, or the suffocating sadness that had come between us. Without her around, the apartment was nothing more than a well-furnished birdcage. I might as well have stayed shut up in Asako's cabin. What was I supposed to do now? They say life's a journey, and when you lose sight of your destination, it's usually best to turn back and retrace your steps. But Kusakabe Asako had always been my home. Now that she was gone, where was I supposed to return to? A journey, huh? Come to think of it, I hadn't done much in the way of traveling. I don't know when this was exactly or how the topic came up, but I did talk to Asako about traveling once.
Huh? Hokkaido? 行ったことあんぞ。
For a job?
いや、プライベートで。
To fight a bear?
なんでだよ。普通に観光だよ。
Did you take a bus tour or something?
いや、観光バスは嫌いだ。ほら、裏の納屋の中に幽霊のポンコツがあるだろ。あれで行ったんだ。
Oh, the motorcycle. What's wrong with bus tours, though?
だっておめえよ、観光バスなんてあれだぞ。はーい、時間です。あれを見てください。これを見てください。ってよ、 便所の時間まで決められてんだぞ。旅行が終わって家に帰れば疲れ以外の何も残っちゃいないような旅の何が面白い。
Good point, I guess. I've never been on a trip, so I can't really say.
いいかユージ、旅の意味ってのはな、何を見つけて何を持ち帰るかが重要だ。人と同じものを見て人と同じ発見をすることはわざわざ旅に出なくてもできる。一人でバイクで気ままに旅して気になるものがあったら止まってみればいい。知らない道があったら入ってみればいい。道を間違えても気にしない。自分で見て感じて発見して理解する。そういうことを繰り返してるとな、人と同じものを見ても違う見え方をしてくるもんだ。軍人なんて仕事をしてるとよ、そういった人とは違う視点ってのが重要だったりもするわけだ。わかるか？
Yeah, well, more or less.
なんとなくかよ。まあそうだよな。よし、そんじゃお前が免許取ったらバイクで北海道行くか。一月も向こうにいりゃなんか違ったもんが見えてくるだろう。
What about work?
サラリーマンじゃねえんだ。休めばいいさ。
I think an office drone would have less trouble taking a vacation, actually.
細けい子だどうだっていいんだよ。バイク2台で北海道まで行ってよ。そっから先は現地解散で別行動な。
Why even bother going together then?
バカだな。私の後についてあれ見ろこれ見ろ言われたらバスと変わんねえだろうが。合流場所だけ決めて別行動すんなよ。そんでな、キャンプ場で合流したら何を見てどう感じたか酒でも飲みながらお互いに語り合うってわけよ。その方が旅として濃いし絶対面白いから。
Sure. I guess we'll need 2 cameras then.
最初のうちはよ、一人の心細さで走るだけで精一杯になっちまう。景色見てる余裕すらねえ。けど慣れてくりゃいろんなもんが見えてくる。気がつきゃメットの中で大声で歌を歌いながら走ってる。一人を楽しめるようになる。どうしても一人じゃ寂しいってんならジョンを連れて行きゃいい。
Oh man, this was around the time when John was still around.
こうよ、タンクの上にベタっと伏せさせてな。犬がいるってだけでこんなに心強いのかって改めて感動するぞ。観光バスの旅行に比べりゃ無駄だらけだ。けどなユージ、人生ってやつは無駄を楽しむもんだ。無駄を重ねてきたやつの方が生きるのがうまい。楽しい人生ってやつだ。ま、ガキにはまだわかんねえか。
Interesting flashback. Someday, let's go to Hokkaido? Sure. That proposal of Asuko's never actually became a reality. But that didn't mean it was too late for me. I hadn't known what to do with myself after losing her, but now I was starting to get an idea of how to move forward. Long story short, I'm gonna leave and have myself a bit of a journey.
どこへ行くの?
Oh, you know. Good question. Guess I'll just go with the breeze for now.
目標を失ったら風の吹く方へってこと?
Yeah, sure. Sure, I'm still a Marine at heart, I guess.
帰ってくるの?
Nope. We're just gonna disappear, and that's the end. Of course I am. Absolutely. I mean, this is me we're talking about. I'll probably come home, or I'll probably come asking you for help if I run into any trouble.
不安。あなた、お金とかちゃんと持ってるの?
Yeah, I've got a bit saved away. And if I run out, I'll just look for work locally.
まあいいわ。行ってらっしゃいな。携帯だけはなくさないようにね。
Okay, when do we actually go back to work? Like, when does Yuuji get back to doing missions? That's a surprise. I was sure you'd try to stop me.
引き止めて欲しかったの?
I mean, you're gonna be lonely without me around, right? Especially at night?
さっさと言っちゃいなさいよ。バカね。
Well, alright. Oh shit, we switched to story time mode. At first, I figured I'd head up to Hokkaido and go looking at the same things Asako had seen. But deciding on a destination beforehand felt a little wrong somehow. For the time being, I returned to Asako's cabin and retrieved her motorcycle from the shed out back. Taking the battery off its trickle charger, I reinstalled it on the oversized, oil-cooled 1100cc bike and pressed the self-starter switch. I'd half expected some trouble with the engine, but it started up just fine on the first try. Then again, I'd taken the bike for a ride about 4 months previously, and when I was done, I'd removed the battery and added a fuel stabilizer to the tank and carburetor, so there wasn't any real reason to be surprised. As long as the engine started up, there wasn't much else to worry about. Once I tied my backpack to the tandem seat, my packing was basically complete. Next, I put my riding gear, a pair of deerskin gloves, a leather double rider's jacket from the UK, and engineer boots with visible wear on the left instep where the shift pedal rested. All I had to do was strap on Asako's old silver jet helmet, and I could leave anytime I pleased. Alright, so soon enough, I was on my way. Doing the things Asako had done, seeing the things she'd seen, wasn't going to help me regain any of the things I'd lost. But it was the only way I could think of to fill the hole her death had left in my heart. I hadn't decided on a destination, but just riding around randomly wouldn't be any different from taking a walk. I kept unconsciously following roads I was already familiar with. Deliberately choosing routes I'd never taken before, I circled up and down Honshu for a good 2 weeks. Ultimately, I found myself heading for Hokkaido, the same way Asako had. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. I tried to take the ferry in Orai, but there weren't any tickets available, so I rode over to Sendai instead. They didn't have many spots for two-wheeled vehicles on the ferry, so if you wanted to be on the safe side, it was best to reserve a spot in advance. As soon as I heard that, I ordered a ticket using the web browser on my cell phone. From Sendai, I'd be riding over to Tomakomai. I'm going to be pronouncing a lot of things wrong. The ferry left at 8 p.m., but I got there at 3:30 in the afternoon, so I ended up napping on the second floor of the terminal. In time, the boat pulled into the harbor, let off the passengers from Nagoya, and finally allowed us to board. I'd taken a few boat rides inside of combat vehicles, but this was my first time taking a motorcycle onto a ferry. Honestly, the process made me a little nervous. Given the size of my bike, I had to be very careful. If I opened the throttle, the rear wheel might skid on the metal deck. One panic squeeze of the front brake might send me toppling over. Following the staff's instructions, I made my way toward the bottom of the boat. I put on my handle lock and tied the motorcycle down, leaving it in low gear. It seemed to be fixed firmly in place. They explained I wouldn't be able to touch the bike again until we reached Hokkaido. So I took my backpack off the rear and headed up to the passenger cabin. Eventually, a gong rang out to signal our departure, and the ferry set sail with a bit of assistance from a tugboat. Outside the cabin window, the lights of Sendai Harbor and the city beyond rolled slowly by. I left mainland Japan behind with a silent farewell, swearing that I'd return one day with my strength renewed, or something like that. The ferry reached Tomakomai a bit past 10 the next morning, and the passengers promptly began to disembark. After untying my motorcycle, I waited for the four-wheeled vehicles to finish, then finally made my way off the boat and onto northern soil. My first impression of Hokkaido was simple. It was a seriously spacious place. The roads were all very wide, and once you got a bit outside of town, you tended to find a whole lot of nothing. Glancing down at my trip meter, I realized it had been 168 kilometers since the last time I refueled the tank. I rode around looking for a gasoline station, but to my surprise, there were none to be found. On the verge of panic, I stopped my bike and took out a road map. Using my cell phone to pinpoint my location, I scoured the map and found that the nearest gas station seemed to be over in... I don't even want to try that one. After finally getting my hands on some gasoline, I was wondering what to do next when a small group of bikers rode by, their motorcycles burned with luggage. I followed them on a whim. They led me past a city famous for its melons and ultimately to a place called Nisho Pass. I stopped to eat at a drive-in there and asked a biker in his 50s who looked like a veteran where I could find the local campground. He pointed it out on my map. Man, Yuuji's having a swell time. I suppose I'd gotten used to city living, but Hokkaido really did seem huge at first. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen the horizon like this. It almost felt like I was in a foreign country. The road stretched out endlessly in front of me. I was riding a gas guzzler that couldn't manage more than 20 kilometers per liter. So the numbers on my trip meter were a source of some real anxiety. I made a habit of fueling up every chance I got. Who knew if there'd even be another gas station after this one? Had Asako felt the same way, looking out onto the scenery? For no particular reason, I picked up a pack of cigarettes that Asako always used to smoke from a gas station. After smoking a single one, my eyes started spinning, and I ended up developing a headache. I don't think this is going to become a habit. My 9th day in Hokkaido. In the campground at night, I noticed a man heating his food inside an empty can, which he held over a small gas stove. He told me it was a good way to cook simple meals for one, since you could just throw away the can later. No need to bother finding water to wash your mess kit. Seemed pretty logical. I was a bit impressed. When I tried it out for myself, it worked well enough, but the food tasted noticeably worse than usual. I decided to file this trick away under might come in handy someday. Day 12. Leaning into the fairing as I barreled down a long straightaway, all I could hear was the sound of my engine, exhaust system, and drive chain. Somehow it felt like the world had left me behind. Irrational anxiety rose up inside me. I'd never been that social of a person, but right now, I wanted to see another human being so badly I felt like screaming. For lack of a better alternative, I gave it a try. I'm not gonna shout that. I'm not, but yeah, there you go. I'd come all the way up north, and here I was shouting the name of a dead woman. Pretty pathetic, really. I didn't have any intention of forgiving her, but maybe it was about time to work on moving forward. Wait, what did I say? Did I say forgiving or forgetting? If I said forgiving, I'm so sorry. Fuck my life. Day 15. I found myself behind an American motorcycle moving sluggishly down a long, straight stretch of road. For a moment, I thought about trying to pass them, but it seemed like more trouble than it would be worth. I slowed to a leisurely pace and spent some time studying the scenery. Eventually, we passed a policeman who'd been lying in wait at an intersection. Now it all made sense. Things might get messy if a cop hauled me in, and JB would probably end up giving me a scolding. It wasn't like I had any place to be. Might as well take it slow and easy. Day 21. 200 meters ahead of me, on a long straightaway, I spotted something black lying in the middle of the road. I approached slowly and found it was the carcass of a deer. A wave of nausea hit me hard. Apparently, I still hadn't gotten over my issues with dead bodies of any kind. I looked around for a car with a big dent in its hood, or a motorcycle with its fork lodged in the exhaust pipe, but there was nothing. No biker lying with his head twisted at an unnatural angle either. There was a bit of a relief. Day 25. The weather took a turn for the worse, and my body temperature quickly plunged. I was shivering in my leather jacket. At first I tried to tough it out until the next rest stop, but after a terrifying moment of lightheadedness, I pulled over and opened my backpack with trembling hands, then put my long raincoat on over my jacket and jeans. It made a surprisingly big difference. The only problem was now my hands. I could rest my left on the head of the engine, but my right grew colder and colder with every minute on the handle. Experimentally, I put on work gloves on top of my riding ones. It helped a little, but I clearly needed a better solution. Day 28. With my bike running in 5th gear at 2500 RPM, I casually opened the throttle. For some reason, my rear wheel spun sideways. I stopped to see if I'd run over a patch of leaves or a cow patty, but it turned out that the wheel had gone completely bald. When I checked the front tire as well, I realized it was badly worn on the right side, but not the left. No wonder she'd been shaking every time I let go of the handle. I hurried over to the nearest motorcycle shop, but they said they'd have to send away for the new tires. Their inventory was apparently better in bigger towns, so I asked the clerk to call around to their other stores. Once we found a place with the right goods, I rode over carefully and had the tires replaced. On top of that, they swapped out the front wheel bearing, distance collar, and axle shaft, all of which had warped from wear. The total cost came to be 67,000 yen. I knew these parts wore out eventually, but the bill was pretty painful. I'd have to try and cut down on food expenses from now on. Day 31, so now it's been a month. Stopping at a random drive-in, I gave their deep-fried salmon meal a try. It proved to be unbelievably salty, practically inedible without rice, and they made up for the poor quality with truly massive portions. Looking down at my overly full plate, I found myself thinking of JB. Despite her size, the woman wasn't a big eater. When we went to restaurants together, she often couldn't finish what she was served. That said, she did have a good 5 meals per day. Whenever she ran out of steam, JB would smile at me and silently push the rest onto my plate. "You're young, so eat up," seemed to be the message. Back when Asako was alive, she'd apparently played a similar role. JB might be a large, noisy, shaggy-headed woman, but you have to admit, she did have a bit of a cute side. I don't know about that one, but wonder what JB's doing right now. For the first time since I'd left, I found myself missing her. My mind had been full of Asako for a very long time. Maybe it was finally beginning to make a little space for other things. That same night, I sent JB an email from my phone. "I love you, Julia." Wow, that was something. I received a response to this brief message in less than a minute. "Are you drunk?" My first reaction was something along the lines of, "That damn shaggy head." But at the same time, I couldn't help smiling at how typically JB it was. I'd seen and experienced a lot since arriving in Hokkaido, and I was starting to regain something that resembled self-confidence. But at this point, I also began to notice something strange. Even when I gunned the throttle, the needle on my RPM gauge was responding very sluggishly. Asako hadn't exactly treated this engine kindly in her day, and it had a good 70,000 kilometers under its belt. It tended to burn through gasoline quickly. I'd been riding it carefully and changing the oil on a regular basis, but one day, I noticed a strange clattering noise coming from the head, and when I pulled over into a convenience store parking lot, the engine promptly gave up the ghost. No matter how many times I pressed the switch, the starter relay just click-clacked, and the bike didn't even twitch. I tried push starting it in the 2nd gear, but the instant I released the clutch, the rear wheel just locked up. For lack of any better options, I spent 6 hours pushing the heavy hunk of junk down the road to the nearest repair shop. From what the mechanic could tell, either the journal bearing in the crankshaft or the big end bolt of the con rod had probably broken. Again, it's like this shit that we had to deal with in Machina's route back in the Fruit of Grisaia. I don't know anything. I don't know any of these words. What the fuck? And repairing it would be a major operation, requiring them to remove the engine from the body of the motorcycle. My financial situation wouldn't allow this, so I called up a vehicle transport company instead. Ended up having to push it another 27 kilometers to their nearest depot. Having lost my wheels, I turned back and began to retrace my path on foot, weighed down by my backpack. Honestly, what the hell was I doing? It might have been funny if it wasn't so ridiculous. As I trudged down the road with my leather jacket and oversized backpack, a group of bikers roared past. A few of them were going ridiculously fast. Where were they off to in such a hurry? If they had some place they wanted to be so bad, I envied them. One of the motorcycles in the group actually took the time to turn around and come back after passing me. It was a Kawasaki D1 with a strange orange and purple paint job. The person riding seemed to be a relatively young man. Lifting the visor from his helmet, he asked if I'd been in an accident. When I honestly replied that my bike had simply met its end, the guy gave me a knowing grin and said, "Bet you rode it to death and never changed the oil, right?" Making excuses seemed like a waste of effort, so I just gave him a wry smile. The man offered me a ride toward my destination, but of course I didn't have any such thing. That was the only reason I'd ended up here in the first place. I'm just a moron who spent the last month riding around in circles. The man's reply to this was, youth, and a loud burst of laughter, adding, I guess I'll leave you to it then. I'm starting to fuck up here. He raised a hand in farewell and rode off the way he'd come. Youth? Alright, yeah, we'll end it there. Alright, well, I'm actually going to record the next episode right away because I can't stop the recording here without it kind of cutting off. And plus, I've always wanted to experiment with recording for an hour again, like an hour-long session. So I'm going to try that right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this session. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, whatever. And I'm going to go record that next episode. So I'll get right to it. And yeah, bye.